Good afternoon, this is Amy Major. I'm MBA Recruitment Manager here at Oxford Saïd Business School and joined this afternoon by Charlotte Kelshiker, who is Admissions Advisor here at the school as well. Thanks for joining, Charlotte, as well. So thank you for joining us, whether it's morning, afternoon or evening, wherever you might be dialing in from. You might have seen as you were dialing in there, depending on how close you were to 2 o'clock, that we just ran a short poll just to really see how many people here dialed in are looking to imminently make an application on the 5th of April, or whether we have an audience of people also looking at next year's stages. So it was actually divided quite down the middle between individuals considering applying on our last deadline on the 5th of April and obviously people with future plans. So that's great because we can give a real kind of general overview in terms of application tips to everybody, but we will obviously reference some elements of obviously consideration for people that are really close to applying, obviously also covering off that common question of your sort of chances of gaining admission in that last round. So we're really going to sort of go over today different elements of the application requirements, starting off really with sort of who comes to the MBA here at Oxford Saïd, and going into some detail into some of the elements and really what is required to make a strong application for you all, hopefully. And we'll absolutely have some adequate time at the end for Q&A. So if you have got questions as we go, please do start typing them in, and then we can be, between Charlotte and I, be sort of filtering those out so that it's nicely clear and succinct for everybody. So, to get us started, here is a short quote from our Dean, Peter Stefano. So this is really just to kind of leave you with a statement, a comment of what we really sort of are maybe looking for when we are considering applicants. We position ourselves as a cutting-edge business school that is embedded in a historical 800-year-old plus university that really positions itself as a business school that is looking to equip its students with the skills to go out there and tackle some of the biggest challenges and problems and opportunities of this generation and the next generation. Oxford never thinks a couple of years in advance. We're always thinking a few decades into the future. So we are really looking to give people those skills to be the responsible business leaders that are needed in today's society, be that whether you're in a startup environment or you're working in the biggest Fortune 500 company. Are you leading with an ethics first approach and being a responsible business leader? So today is really about application tips. So we aren't going to talk so much about the experience of the Oxford MBA and sort of the vibe here within the school and the sort of culture and ethos, but I thought it was pertinent to start with that statement, really to just give you a sense of what we're looking for, perhaps when you're looking to sort of frame your application and position yourself as an applicant. So when we talk about, the class profile and who comes to the Oxford MBA, we often get that question. People will say, am I a typical MBA? I would say there's no typical MBA, and what you can see here is a really diverse class. Charlotte, would you have any sort of comments here with regards to the class profile in terms of these?
Not particularly. I think you're absolutely right, Amy. It's a really broad programme that we offer, and because our MBA is very much aimed at the generalist manager, it really can cater for people from many different walks of life, many different backgrounds, and you'll certainly see that represented in our class.
Okay, so a few things I would just sort of comment on here, and we'll come on to this in a bit more detail. Hugely diverse in terms of nationality. So if you're sat there thinking that you're going to apply in the 4th round, and do we have a set number of quotas and regions of the world from which we're looking to admit people, that is absolutely not the case. You can see it is a real diverse melting pot, and somehow I wonder by the end of every admissions cycle we end up with this hugely diverse class, and that is not through us having any kind of amazing data spreadsheets or information where we're really sort of looking to create that in a particular way. So if you're thinking, am I from somewhere that I would have a greater chance in another round? Absolutely not the case. Obviously, you can see we are working, gender parity and working towards that is a big goal here at the school, and we absolutely hope that in this coming cohort that we will have over 40% of the cohort being female, but we are a school that's absolutely committed to the merit of your application. So that won't be based on any kind of positive discrimination in any way at all. Charlotte.
One quick observation, anyone that's listening who's an international student might be a little concerned that in stage 4 that we might be looking to fill spots just with home students by now, because of course coming from outside the EU you would need to apply for things like a student visa. We've deliberately set our last closing deadline to allow plenty of time for any applicant to be admitted and still have sufficient time to secure your place in the class and fulfill all of the necessary administrative steps to get yourself here in Oxford to start the programme in September. I think that's worth clearing up in case any of you international candidates were a little concerned about the timing.
That's a really, really good point. Absolutely, Charlotte. I think commenting on years of work experience and age range, again, this 5 years work experience, actually, we probably should have the word average above that. That is an average. So that means in a cohort of around anywhere from 300 to 340 students, that it's firmly an average. So there are people, as you can see, coming at age 22, 23, 24, and there's people in their sort of mid to later 30s. So it's an average. Please don't think that, if you're not ready to apply in this last round and you end up applying next year, if you have a great application, your age by 1 year is not going to change your likelihood of admission. So I won't talk about GMAT too much more now, because I think we'll come onto that in the coming slides. And I guess we've sort of commented to some of these points in that last slide there, but international diversity is an absolute focus here at the school. And as we've said, just by design every year it ends up being ever more eclectic than the year before, and so we value you based on your overall candidacy as a candidate. I would also say as well is that our class is very much typical is people who maybe have 2 to 3 passports and have lived and worked and studied in different parts of the world. So I would say more than anything, we're probably looking for you to have a global view, but regardless of the passport that you hold and maybe where you grew up in the world. So moving on to application requirements.
So yeah, I can speak to this slide, Amy, thanks. So application requirements, we're going to look on the next slide about material that you need to gather, but just speaking about what we look for in a candidate, as we've already said, there's an average of 5 years work experience that most of our candidates would tend to come to the programme with. And as part of your application, we ask you to distill that into a 1-page CV or resume for us. And really, in terms of the most salient information to include in your CV, we want to see, of course, your qualifications, tertiary level only as far as your CV is concerned, so university level, in other words, your previous employment with dates and locations. And it's always great to see a little bit of information about what you like to perhaps do in your free time, whether that's on a voluntary basis or whether that's literally just kicking back and relaxing. It can tell us a little bit about you and how you like to balance your life and spend your time. In terms of your academics, we do ask all of our candidates to have completed their undergraduate degree. We're not particularly fussed in terms of what subject you've read as an undergraduate, however. We're not, for example, looking for you to have read a particularly quantity subject at university. As we said earlier, it's a very broad church here at Oxford Said, so you very well might have read a degree in the humanities, in the arts, perhaps the social sciences, or you could be coming from a STEM subject. It's absolutely fine. And in terms of what we look for degree classification-wise, we'd look for an international qualification that puts you in line, broadly speaking, with a UK upper second class honours. So for those of you familiar with the GPA system scored out of 4, thinking here about the US, that would be about 3.5 and above. But don't worry about converting your degree performance to the UK system for your application. That's part of our due diligence to make that comparison when you apply. So you might want to do a little bit of research around your degree, what you've got, and how that compares to the UK system. But I wouldn't worry overly in, for example, obtaining comparison statements from UK NARIC, for example. It's just not necessary. So broadly speaking, a UK 2-1, any subject. Alongside your undergraduate degree, we also ask that you have taken either a GMAT or GRE in the 5 years prior to applying to the MBA. Now, what we're looking for in your GMAT or GRE performance is a nice balanced scorecard. The MBA is a very generalist program. There are going to be aspects of the program that are quite quant heavy. There are also going to be aspects not only of the program, but the way that we teach here that mean that you need to be able to assimilate data sets, you need to be able to assimilate information, posit an argument, articulate your point of view in class. So the quant component, the verbal component, integrated reasoning, these are all important factors in your GMAT or GRE performance. And we are looking for something fairly balanced. In terms of the kind of scores that we'd ask you to aim for, this is not really a binary situation where if you score X or above, you're in, and if you score X or below, you're out. It is just one aspect of your application. But I think particularly for those of you who maybe graduated from university some time ago, you may find that your GMAT or GRE is more accurately representative of your current capabilities than perhaps your degree was that you might have sat perhaps 8 years ago. So for those of you who are sitting the GMAT or have sat the GMAT already, a score of at least 650 is likely to be viewed as more competitive by the admissions committee. Doesn't mean that if you scored under 650 that we're not interested in you. That's just not the case. Though it is fair to recognise that for certain careers, certain potential post-MBA ambitions, you may find that a score of 650 is not going to be sufficient to make you a compelling candidate. Those of you who are potentially targeting employment in the very competitive world of management consulting for one of the top strategy houses, for example, you'll be more likely to find that a score north of 700 is going to be more realistic to make you a strong candidate. And for those of you who are taking a GRE or have taken a GRE, you will already know that you don't get a total score for that particular test. So looking at the verbal and quantitative components, I would say that a score that's north of 161 in each of those is likely to put you broadly in line with the GMAT scores that I've already talked about. The next step that will affect some of you is the need to supply a test of proficiency in English language. Now, it's worth mentioning the tests that we accept here first off. We accept the internet-based TOEFL test and the IELTS. You need to have taken one of these tests within the last 2 years prior to applying if you are a national of a country that is not majority English speaking as recognised by the UK Border Agency. Now, there's a list of countries on our website, so you can consult those and first of all ask yourself the question, am I a national of one of those countries? If you are, great, this doesn't affect you. You can move on with the rest of your application. If you're not a national of one of those countries, you might qualify for a waiver from this test requirement. And the way that you can qualify for a waiver is you have either undertaken your university degree entirely in the English language, or you've undertaken your university degree in one of the countries that is majority English speaking. So for example, If you are a candidate from India, let's say, and your degree was taught entirely in English at an Indian university, you can supply documentation as part of your application that just confirms the language of instruction for your degree. We will grant a waiver. You won't need to take a test. Scenario 2, you're from Japan. You studied for your undergraduate degree in the USA. Clearly, therefore, your degree was taught entirely in English. We will see that from the transcript that you upload to your application. We will grant a waiver. You don't need to take an English test. Third scenario, you're applying from China. Your degree was taught in Chinese entirely. You will need to take an English test and upload that as part of your application. Now, you'll see when you check our website that there are certain score thresholds that you absolutely must meet in terms of the English language test in order for your application to proceed. There are individual component scores for your speaking, listening, writing, and whatever the other one is that I can't think of right now, but different aspects of your listening. Thank you, Amy. And your overall test score in IELTS needs to be 7.5, and in TOEFL it's 110. And as we've just said, they also break those down into component scores. So make sure you meet those minimums. Unlike the GMAT and GRE, the English tests are not just indicative, they are really a very mandatory part of your application with regards to the wider university setting that we have here at Oxford. And Oxford University's policy is that candidates who fall short of those required scores should not be admitted to a master's level programme. So do look carefully about what we require. Make sure you hit those test minimums for the English language if you fall into the category of needing to take them. So what else do we look for? Well, we ask you to write 2 short essays for us, and we're going to explore those on a separate slide in a moment, so I won't go into the titles right now, but suffice to say, one sets you a challenge, something for you to think about, and the other is more optional, but I think we would both very much agree that if you don't take full advantage of the second essay opportunity, you are missing a trick. But like I say, more about that later. Next thing you need to do is to have your application supported by 2 referees. Now, these referees can either be drawn from your previous academic existence or from your professional life now. My suggestion would be that if you graduated from university not particularly recently, you've been working for a few years, do register 2 professional colleagues as your referees. Now, these don't necessarily need to be your line manager. It doesn't have to be someone that you report to, but it does need to be someone who can speak to your ability in the world of work, can comment on your suitability for undertaking an MBA, perhaps someone that understands your motivation in terms of your career aspirations. This might be a senior colleague, or it could be a peer. It could be a mentor. It could even be a client who you've delivered significant work to during your working relationship. And as we've already mentioned, last but not least, 2 years of relevant work experience. So if we just hop on to the next slide, we'll just run through what it is you need to do to put your application together. So you've probably already discovered from doing your research that it's a completely online, paper-free application process. So you start an online application. You can start to populate the form with various personal details about you. And what I suggest you do next is to register your referees. So if you register their details, it will be name, email address, street address, the relationship that you have with them, register them. What then happens is that your referee will receive an email from the school. They will be able to log into their area of our online application system, start to answer a few questions about you, how they know you, how they rate you against a few competencies, and also they'll be invited to upload a letter of recommendation, which can either be free text or indeed it can be a Word document, for example, that they've already prepared. And I say register them straight away because then your referees can be working in tandem to the time that you're spending completing the online application yourself. So if you don't get to registering them until a few days before the deadline, then you're really not being fair on your referees, expecting them to turn around a quality reference for you with very little notice. I would also suggest that prior to registering your referees, that you at least have a conversation with them, afford them the courtesy of just saying, just to check, are you happy to be a referee for me? I'm applying to business school. One of the institutions I'm applying to is Oxford Said. Please look out for an email for them. Make sure you can attend to that in terms of the timescale. Tell your referees that their recommendation also needs to be submitted by the application deadline. So they can be working away on that. You're working away on your application. So as we've already mentioned, one-page CV, and that should detail your most recent work experience. For those of you who aren't sure about a format, perhaps you haven't put a CV together very recently, there is a template that's available on the online application system. You're not obliged to use it, but it is quite nice, clean and clear, and will help you distill your experience down into just one page.
We could provide the link to that in our follow-up to you all.
Yeah, I think that'd be really helpful. The next thing that you will need to think about, and I'm sure you all have this top of mind in terms of, you are on the brink of applying to an MBA. It's a transformational program. It's something that you want to study because you are looking to bring about change in yourself. This could be perhaps you are accelerating your career. You are staying within your chosen sector, but you are climbing to the next level of progression within your chosen career pathway. Or perhaps you're looking to effect change. Perhaps you're looking to move from a background in sector A towards starting a career in sector B. Perhaps you work for a family business, or perhaps you're being groomed to take over control of a family business. Or perhaps you are thinking of starting your own business, or indeed you have a nascent business and you're now looking to accelerate it to the next level of growth. In other words, your post-MBA career plan is going to be of paramount importance to you when you put your application together, but also to us when we are making decisions as to who we want to meet at interview and who we think is potentially the right kind of admit for our program. It is really important that you do spend time thinking about your post-MBA career plan in some detail. You'll see in that section of the application form, we invite you to tell us what your plan is, broadly speaking, in terms of, are you seeking employment? Are you an entrepreneur? Are you perhaps falling into a different category? For example, this might be something like working for a family business. So you are not an entrepreneur yourself, but you are perhaps taking over a long-running family concern. You could be a candidate that has potentially two different career objectives on the table. But fundamentally speaking, once you've answered the first question about whether you are seeking employment or running your own business or perhaps doing something different, you will then see a series of questions unfold that are deliberately quite reflective, quite provocative, quite challenging, that will really help you hold a mirror up to what it is you want to achieve and give it a good, long, hard reality check. What am I doing now? What do I want to do? Where do I want to do it? What do I know about the recruitment processes and practices of my target employers, for example, post-MBA? How well do I measure up against that particular set of criteria? And if that doesn't work out, well then, what is my plan B? What other opportunities are potentially available to me and viable? So there's a number of questions that we ask you to write about in some detail. Anything to add to that,
I think
Amy?
it's a good reason to, some people are concerned that that we might look at your application and judge you on how long you have your application open for. I absolutely recommend starting an application so that you can see this section in particular, because like Charlotte says, there's about 5 questions dependent on whichever section you pick. And it's good to just, go in there, even if you just note them down and you start to think about them on your commute to work, for example. So do open up the application if you think you're ready to get started. So
yeah, couldn't agree more. This is absolutely not a rush job. This is something that you should be deliberating over and really spending time giving deep thought to, because you are about to undertake something really significant and really transformational in your life. So do afford the time to do a really good job of that. As I've already mentioned, English language might be applicable to you. If so, there's a section on the application form where we ask you to either upload your test results, or alternatively, if you do meet one of those criteria for potentially having a waiver, then we would invite you to upload some documentary proof of language of instruction, or your degree transcript, which sometimes has language of instruction on it. You also need to upload all of your academic transcripts. So those will be your full mark sheets showing us how you performed on each subject that you studied throughout the duration of your undergraduate degree, and also showing us your final degree classification. If you also have a master's degree, please also give us details of that qualification, and likewise upload your degree transcript for your master's, and well, quite your DPhil as well, if that's pertinent. We also ask you to upload your GMAT or GRE score report. Now, one little proviso here, you'll probably remember when you took the test, you could name up to 5 institutions that you would like to share your official scores with. Make sure we're one of them. And a tip, we are listed separately to the University of Oxford. So you'll find that the University of Oxford is listed on the GMAT website and on the ETS website for GRE, but you'll see that Oxford Saïd Business School is listed separately, so make sure you pick us out. And also, even if you have said that you want to share your score with Oxford Saïd, you still need to upload your copy of your test report, because without it, we can't verify your scores. You need to upload your essays. We've already said that we're going to speak to those in a little bit more detail. I think it's on the next slide. Yeah, we've talked about registering your referees. Last but not least, you do need to pay an application fee. It's £150, very easy to purchase. You just jump off of the online application system through to a payment portal, so it's no more difficult than just buying something on Amazon. It's embedded within the application form for you. So hopefully you will do all of these steps well before the deadline passes. You'll be ready to submit your application when the deadline falls. Just for those of you who might be wondering, the deadline is always at 12 midnight on the deadline day, at the end of the day. However, I would urge you to submit a few days early. If you can, that gives us the chance to start looking at your application, and if anything is missing, we then have a chance to let you know, and you can rectify it before the deadline passes.
Yeah. Something else to mention is that without all of these elements complete, your application will not be reviewed. So Charlotte is one of our admissions advisors. She will receive applications to process once all of these elements are complete. If it's not complete, it will not be reviewed, and therefore your application will effectively sit there until it becomes complete. So that can mean that you then, if you didn't have everything complete, say for stage 4, you would then be looking at next year. So obviously it's really important to make sure that you have everything complete.
I think it's worth mentioning that because this is stage 4 and it's our closing deadline,
yeah,
your application has no further stage to roll forward into.
Yes.
If you were in this position in stage 3 and something was missing, the deadline came and went, then sure, your application would sit there and you would have stage 4 to become complete. But because this is the last roll of the dice, as it were, for this admissions round, if anything is missing and the deadline passes on the 5th of April, that's it for this year. And if you wanted to be considered next year, it would be a case of waiting for the new round to open in August and starting a brand new application at that point and resupplying all of your materials. Amy.
Okay. So I really wanted to just talk about the essays in a little bit more detail, as we have a big captive audience here today. So we have 2 essays. So these are the essays for 2019-20 entry, so this September. We aren't sure yet whether these will be different for 2020 entry. So something I would say as a sort of word of caution, will come on sort of application deadlines. But if you're looking to apply in maybe the first deadline of next year, don't start writing your essays until we confirm that they are the essays and the requirements for that actual application cycle. That said, I think we can both agree here that we both quite like these essays, and the first essay, which is the main essay, we have only had for the last 2 application rounds. So my vote would certainly be to keep it. So if that's giving you any indication, but I'm sure I won't have the casting vote as to whether that's the essay for next year. So content-wise, what might you like to think about here? So if you think about Oxford Saïd's mission, so to be a cutting-edge business school, tackling world-scale problems, challenges, opportunities, I think that, you know, this essay really speaks to that. So just a few questions that I often get is a statistical trend. So people will say to me, does this need to be something that I'm taking from the Harvard Business Review or from a academic journal? It can be, it absolutely doesn't need to be. It can be something anecdotal, it could be something that you've noticed. Equally, it can be from something academic. Obviously, of course, if you are referencing an academic journal or publication, please make sure you do reference it. We obviously do check your essays for any sort of plagiarism there. And really, you know, why is it important to you, and how could it be changed for the better? We're effectively looking to sort of understand you here. We're looking to get to know you. The MBA application is a very introspective process, would be my suggestion. And so therefore, we aren't looking for you to, we're sat here in the UK, and maybe this week would be quite timely, let's mention the B word, Brexit, okay? Just because that is something that is a huge topic in the world right now, or certainly in Europe, doesn't mean you have to write about that because it's sort of the biggest thing in the news. It's something that is personal to you, that you feel passionate about. If your interviewer in reading your application found it really interesting and then wanted to talk about that for 5 to 10 minutes of your interview, would you feel comfortable talking at ease about that subject? So we're not looking for you to be an academic expert, but think about passion, think about your purpose, think about your future plans when you're writing this. Also, if you're a few words over the 500 word count, that doesn't matter. We're not religiously checking the word count. Clearly, it does need to be around the 500 words, and I would suggest no more than 10% over as a rule. The second essay, and Charlotte mentioned this earlier, 250 words. Is there anything not covered in the application form which you would like the admissions committee to know about you? My one do not suggestion here is not to put there is nothing else I would like to say, or there's nothing else I would like to add. We want to get to know you. So I know in certain cultures, CVs, resumes, applications really vary. Perhaps you're from somewhere where typically you would only talk about your professional life. For the MBA application at Oxford, we want to get to know you in your entirety as much as you're willing to share with us. So if you want to talk about something that you do outside of your work life, something that's maybe really shaped your life, your purpose, your plans, then we would love to hear about that. Equally, don't think, well, I work 80 hours a week and I have no hobbies, therefore does that make me boring? It absolutely does not. We want to hear about whatever you are passionate about, whatever you feel you want to tell us. Some people use this as a sort of 250 word, I would term it kind of elevator pitch, sort of sales pitch of sort of why me? Here's my last ditch attempt to tell you why I'd be great for the MBA. I think that's sometimes can work as an approach. Equally, perhaps you have an area of your application which you think could be what we might term the Achilles heel of your application. Perhaps it's something that you're thinking, I wish that was slightly better. And perhaps you might want to reference that. Equally, I wouldn't say you want to spend the whole 250 words speaking about that. Charlotte alluded to the fact that sometimes you might be a very different person now to the undergraduate transcript that you hold. But perhaps you might want to just explain to us, maybe you were working full-time whilst you were doing your degree and you don't quite have the grade you wish you had achieved, and you just want to explain that and cover that off with the admissions committee. So lots of different approaches you can take there. Really just wanted to speak about that to sort of, I guess, make it a little bit more human in terms of what you might like to cover and what you might like to focus on. Equally, the essays are very much an area where there is no wrong answer. It's really just a case of how much passion you show and how much you allow the admissions committee to get to know you. Okay, sorry, I got a little bit stuck there on the keys. So how can you strengthen your application? I think, you know, we have talked about some of these elements, but I just really want to sort of cover off what we are sort of looking for when we are considering maybe the strength of your application. And I'm going to start with sort of communication and teamwork. And these are really areas that are going to come out, all of these 5 areas are things that are going to come out both in your written application, but when we meet you in person for interview. So I'm going to talk about them really in tandem, because anything that you put onto that paper, you might need to be able to quantify in your in-person interview. You might need to be able to back that up. Anything that you put that is potentially deemed of interest or that your interviewer picks up on and sort of is starred in your application when they come to meet you for the interview, they might want to talk about. Communication and teamwork, absolutely crucial. We are looking to bring together this group of cohorts, not a group, a cohort that is around, you know, 300 plus people that are all going to challenge each other, are all going to provide different insights, and equally are going to work together. So, you know, very much like when you're applying for that dream job role, we are looking to understand your communication skills, your ability to teamwork with others. Equally, you may be an introvert, you may not like teamwork, that is absolutely fine, but do you also show the ability that you can work in a team, that you can communicate with others, and that you will also be somebody that is open to very different people to yourself, not just in geographical background, geographical nationality, where you're from, but degrees, your work culture, style, industry, function, etc. And you can really bring this out in obviously your career vision, which I think we spoke about quite a bit at length there. And this may come back to sort of your awareness as well. I think the career vision really links to that. We are clearly looking for people with incredibly, you know, lofty goals, people who want to sort of change the world and, you know, take on a big challenge. Equally, you need to be realistic as well and to consider lots of different elements. For example, a good example of this may be if you are looking to make that what in sort of MBA world is termed as the career triple jump of changing location, function and sector. What is your awareness of the likelihood of you being able to do that is a good example. You may well be applying and be up against candidates that are maybe only switching one of those things. So how can you prove to the admissions committee that you're somebody who's going to be able to do that against a very competitive, you know, field of candidates? And finally, moving on to leadership, obviously the MBA is a program that is designed to enhance you as a leader, maybe help you accelerate your career, become a leader, become a better leader, understand yourself as a leader. You don't need to be a leader already, but do you show leadership potential? And even if you haven't managed, there will be things that you have managed, there will be projects you have managed, there will be responsibility you've taken, autonomy you've taken. So think about that kind of language in both your essays and the career vision element and all of the questions that we ask you. Can you show your potential as a leader? So anything else you'd add there, Charlotte?
No, I think that's absolutely right. These are some of the areas we'll also be asking your referees to comment upon. You know, as Amy said, we want a really rounded view of you and what you're going to bring to our class and how generous you're going to be with your classmates in terms of your background, your experience, your knowledge.
Okay. So I think our last slide before we move on to questions. So so we have as close to 15 minutes as possible, we will explain this one quite quickly, because I do honestly think if you're dialed in now and you're looking at applying next year, you probably want to be dialing back in to our webinars in the summer.
Yeah,
Charlotte.
absolutely. And for those of you that are really inspired by what we've had said to you today, and you can't wait to get going on your application, if you are targeting stage 1 next year, do not start your online application yet, because we still have this year's round open. We still have stage 4 applications to consider. You can't apply for next year yet. We will reopen the application system after we've dealt with stage 4. We're likely to reopen it in August. So keep your eye on our website. But what you can do at the moment, as Amy has said, think about those essays, but check back for any changes, but also think carefully about your career ambitions. Start to give that some thought, and also think about who you're going to ask to be your referees ultimately. So you can use that time really wisely.
Okay. So, as some of you may or may not be aware, depending on how closely you're looking at our website, we just made our offers for stage 3 on the 22nd of March, so last Friday. So we've got lots of very excited people in touch with us now. And we have the last deadline coming up on the 5th of April. And we cannot state, because it's too much of a change date, we cannot state how many offers we will be able to make in stage 4, but we are absolutely believe that there will be offers to be made in stage 4 this year. So what I would stress, however, is that clearly the field is competitive, and we will be making less offers in stage 4 than we will have made in any of those earlier 3 stages that you see on the slide there now. So therefore, making sure that every element of your application is as competitive as possible is more important, arguably, than probably in those earlier 3 stages, because the odds are just slightly lower. Okay, so if you feel that you have something that is halfway to your best or 75% to your best, you might want to wait for next year. If you feel that you're pretty proud of it, it's pretty much this is going to be my best shot, then please do go ahead and apply. You have, as I said to somebody on the phone earlier, you have as much chance as the next person, and this really is about putting something together that you feel personal or passionate about. But you do need to make sure that some of those application requirements in terms of the GMAT, in terms of your TOEFL or IELTS or GRE, are to a standard that would be deemed acceptable by the admissions committee. For the benefit of everybody who is considering for next year, our general advice is that our first 3 rounds, level of admission, your chance of admission, will be arguably the same, as long as you're putting forward what you feel is your best application. And we probably will have very limited scholarship funding available in this last round. The scholarships committees are just meeting this week from stage 3, but our sort of general rule of thumb is that most of our scholarships are given out in those first 3 stages. So to be applying in stage 4 and be hoping for funding, your chances will be incredibly slim in this very last round. So just to make you aware of that. So Charlotte, anything else?
No, you're absolutely right. In terms of funding, the January deadline is always in line with the wider university's funding deadline. So really, if you apply in stages 1, 2 or 3, you are casting your net as wide as possible for all of the funding opportunities, not only offered by us at the school, but also Oxford University centrally. Whereas stage 4, yes, there might be a few scholarships left, but only those offered by the school. The University of Oxford's funding will have all been awarded after the stage 3 decisions. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to start with some questions. I would say at this stage, if you have an inquiry that's particularly specific around, I have this score, I've done this degree, this is my background, do I stand a chance? Please send us an email to mba-recruitment@sbs.ox.ac.uk. I'll put that email address before we sign off into the chat box so that you can see that. But somebody does ask a question here about the sort of their likelihood, asking whether 660 GMAT would be a competitive score. So I think, as we said, 650 or above is deemed a competitive score, and we are looking at your academics very much in the round. So I would say that 660 with a strong undergraduate degree could be good. Equally, if you have a average solid GPA of less than 3.5 or less than a 2.1, you are going to be facing quite an uphill struggle to gain admission in that last round. So if you feel that 660, which is still a very good score, I'm sure there's lots of people on this call that are hoping to get a 660 or have a 660, could still be a workable score, but considered with good other academics to go with that. Yeah,
I think that's absolutely it. It is about that sort of holistic nature of your profile. Really, every aspect counts in this last stage.
Okay. Yes, we have a question about how long the GMAT score is valid for. So it's valid for up to 5 years. So if you took it 4 years ago, that is fine. Obviously, do pay close attention to when your score is running out, if it is in the 5th year. So in terms of, we've got a question here about references, whether they can be technical or academic. You absolutely can use an academic reference as long as this is somebody who knows you and can talk about you. We are looking for something that is different to a typical employment reference. So we're looking for more than Charlotte Kelshaker was employed from 2010 to 2019, and she had a good sickness record. We want to know about you. We want to learn about you. So it's quite a free form in terms of the questions and what your referee can speak about you. So as long as they know you well, absolutely fine.
Yeah, and I think if it is an academic reference, it needs to be someone that you've really kept in touch with since you've been in the world of work. So they understand not only your academic capability, but your application of that academic knowledge in the world of work now, and how that is progressing, so they can really speak in some detail about you as a potential candidate for the programme, rather than just as a sort of character reference or just pure academics about how you performed on that particular class 6 years ago.
Oh, good question here. So what's the word limit for the detailed post-MBA career plan? There is no word limit. So there's effectively sort of 4 or 5 questions for whether you tick employment or entrepreneurship or other. I would say, as a rule, so in terms of how we see that as from our end on the application, it's I would say generally a few sides of A4, but it's condensed on sort of a right-hand margin. So it is probably, we probably see sort of 2 to 3 fairly detailed paragraphs per question. I hope that provides you with a guide there. We had somebody just asking for us to reiterate about international applicants in the 4th round. So absolutely, you have just as much a chance as somebody who is a UK national. As you can see, our class is 93% international. So most of our applicants are coming from outside of the UK.
Question about post-MBA employment options. Are you able to choose more than one preferred sector and more than one preferred location? Yes, you can. Short and sweet.
Okay, somebody asking a little bit more specifically about, does the essay have to be about a business, economic or finance related issue, any topic, a social issue? Somebody mentioning about something about a topic of something to do with sports. Like, there is no specific expectation. It's whatever you feel passionate about. So we see everything from, the biggest issues that are facing society down to things that are really personal to the country that you're from, and something that you've noticed within your, your home nation, or when you were growing up, or something you've witnessed in your working life. It really is whatever feels personal to you and allows us to get to know you. Okay. Okay, could we tell people a little bit more about the interview process? So just to touch on this, so you obviously you would submit your application and then you get invited to interview. You have three options, either to interview via Skype or in one of a couple of key global hubs at each application stage, or we invite you to an interview experience here in Oxford. Now, due to the numbers of applications in round 4 being slightly smaller, the two options will be the Skype interview option or the interview experience here in Oxford. For the interview experience here in Oxford, that consists of a dinner at one of the Oxford colleges on a Thursday evening, and then it's a whole host of sessions, very much like a sort of open house, open day here at the business school, and your interview then takes place during that day as part of the day. You obviously know the time that it's going to take place, and then you're collected from the relevant session and taken to your interview. The interviews are not conducted by alumni, they are conducted by administration of the business school, the people that are associated with the MBA programme. So both myself and Charlotte both interview as part of the admissions process, for example.
And it is just one-on-one with a member of the admissions committee. It's not a panel interview, and it's not an assessment centre. It is just a conversation that probes your application in more detail.
Okay. Somebody here asking about scholarships for executive MBA. So just to clarify, this session is very much about the full-time MBA. I would recommend that you get in touch with the Executive MBA team. Obviously, you can also inquire via us, and I'm more than happy to put you straight in touch with them. A good question here. If I decided to submit my application for next year, will I lose the recommendations submitted by my recommenders? So this is a good point. We have a fairly new application system. How will that work?
Yeah, as I've already said earlier in the webinar, if you want to be considered next year, you need to apply in next year's round, which will not open until August this year. So you can't start your application for next year until we open the new applications round. So we finish stage 4 for this year, then the system will go offline for a while we refresh everything, and then it will be relaunched in August, and that's when you'll be able to start your application for next year, and that's when you'll be able to register your referees and get going.
Somebody asking a question which could be of interest to people here who are applying next week. So somebody is giving their GMAT another attempt on the 1st.
Yeah.
So with the GMAT, you get your score on the day that you take the test. You need to upload your test taker's copy, PDF, to the application and submit. The official score will then come from GMAT.
Yeah.
Charlotte, would you like to add here?
Yeah, for sure. So those of you who are taking GMAT or have taken it and you're taking it again, because you get your provisional test scores as a PDF on the day you take your test, in theory, you can sit your GMAT right up until the deadline day. As Amy said, you get your provisional score report in PDF form on the day that you take the test, and you need to attach that to your application. So when you submit it, you then get taken to a place where you are prompted to upload. You can do that, then you can submit, and in theory still make the deadline. So for that person who's taking their test on the 1st, make sure you attach your test score report for that test attempt when you submit your application, and all will be well. Please remember, even if you register us to have access to your scores, we are not sent anything by GMAT or GRE. Okay, we verify your scores online, and we cannot do that unless you upload your copy of your test results. The person taking it on the 1st, yes, you're just going to sneak in under the wire. If you have any option around this, I would say never contemplate taking your test that close to applying. Different for this particular individual because it's a retake, and so hopefully they'll experience some uplift, and that will be great and further strengthen their application. But if it is your first test attempt, don't run it that close to the wire. Make sure you take your test well in advance so that you've got your score report, you can upload it and apply on time.
Okay, so I'm just going to quickly answer a couple of ones I've been reading here while Charlotte was answering that. Would visiting the school in person put you at a higher advantage? Absolutely, absolutely not. Equally, it might help you get a sense of the cultural environment here. Obviously, we realise we're part of a very competitive landscape of, global MBA programs. So coming here might help you see Said as your home for the year for the MBA. Perhaps that helps you put across your passion differently on paper. Equally, being on this call right now, you're doing all the right things to, equip yourself with information to make a good application. But no, we have obviously, as you know, candidates coming from all over the globe that don't get the chance to visit. I would say if you can get the chance before you come on campus in the September, whichever year that may be, then that's definitely recommended. If somebody is scoring less than the required score, Charlotte, on the TOEFL or the IELTS, would they be rejected?
Someone here who doesn't meet the IELTS required score overall, the long and the short of it really is you do need to meet that minimum. It's set by the University of Oxford. It's not set by the school as a sort of arbitrary figure. It is a central standard that the university holds all of its academic departments to, and we should not admit anyone that falls short of that. So you will need to retake.
Excellent. Right, okay, let's sorry, somebody missed it. Can we restate? The interviews can be done in Skype, or they can be done in person here as part of the interview experience.
I think it's worth mentioning there, just in case any of you are listening from overseas and thinking, oh, will a Skype interview put me at a disadvantage? Does it mean that I don't get such a good interview experience? It's going to be the same conversation, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's via Skype. We're such an international program. So many of our candidates need to have a Skype interview. It's absolutely fine. It really doesn't disadvantage you at all. And we don't think badly of any candidate who can't either afford to fly to the UK or get the time off work to make that trip. So your interview conversation will be equally valuable to us, whether it's Skype or in person. So I hope that reassures you.
Somebody here who sounds like they're close to submitting, whose referee has made a mistake in their letter of recommendation, can they change that? Yeah, I'll reply to you with my email address. You can send that through and then we'll get that changed on your application. Okay, let's have a look. Have time for a couple more. If people do need to start dialing off, then please don't worry, there is a recording. Okay. There's some quite specific questions here that people are sort of talking about their whole background and their sort of profile. I would say you want to sort of get in touch with us directly and take a sort of personal profile review. I'm going to share the email address of where you can share your profile. I'm just seeing if there's anything here that is a bit more general for the benefit of everybody here. How important is it to have a global brand name in your employment history? It's great. Equally, it's fine if you don't. So we have a class that's from all over the globe, from all different companies. Some people coming with their own startup from a developing part of the world that nobody else may have heard of, and they could still well be an incredible candidate.
Someone might have been a research scientist. Someone might be coming to us from a military career, looking to enter civilian life. Someone might be coming to us from the world of medicine or the performing arts or creative arts. As we said, it's a very, very broad church here. It's not just about corporate employment history at all.
There's two more questions here. So the application does allow for you to provide more than 2 recommendations.
Yeah,
what would we advise in that regard?
It's because the application system is quite generic, and for some of our programs you do have to have more than 2. The requirement for the MBA is 2. Think carefully about who to register. If you wanted to register a 3rd referee, you can, as you've identified, the system will allow you to do so, but we are only interested in receiving 2, so you don't have to register a 3rd or a 4th or whatever it might be. It's not going to strengthen your application. If any of you are in touch with any alumni from the program and your alumni friend says, oh, I'd be very happy to support your application, my tip would be don't use one of your registrations for that alumni friend, ask the alum to reach out directly to the admissions team, because we can talk to them about how they can support your application by sending us just an off-system email. That's absolutely fine. It's always great to know who's plugged into the alumni network around the world. But in terms of your references, really just try and stick to just 2 good quality referees.
I just saw one last question there that I thought was really helpful, and now I cannot find it. Any particular resources that we would recommend for GMAT tests? So we aren't permitted to advise you on certain tests that are helpful. There are a lot of resources online. My advice would be, and the general advice from GMAT would be, to get the official book from GMAT. There's lots of different prep courses that you can obviously pay for online. Really sort of cracking the GMAT or GRE is really kind of figuring out how you are going to best learn this, how you're going to best approach it. Everybody's very different. I speak to candidates on campus here who have found that having their own flashcards was the best approach. Other people go cover to cover with the GMAT book. Other people sign up for more expensive prep courses online, in-person courses. Everybody's very different, and it may depend on how long ago you last studied, or how much your understanding is of how you might look to get to grips with this. Generally, GMAT will recommend anywhere between 60 and 100 hours of study, and they will recommend committing to this over a continued period of time. So over a couple of months, generally is the recommended sort of rule of thumb. So I think with that, we're just a couple of minutes after 3. I'm conscious that we do have quite a few questions here which we maybe haven't answered yet. I'm just going to share in the chat the MBA recruitment email address. You can send any inquiries to there, and we will absolutely reply to you. Equally, I'm just going to stay online for a couple more minutes just to answer some of these questions. So if you want to get your question answered and it was fairly sort of generic, then I will absolutely reply to you. Equally, as I mentioned, there are quite a number of questions that were really sort of specific and would take some time and thought. So please do send through your inquiry to MBA-recruitment. With that, thank you, Charlotte. Good luck to everybody looking to submit on the 5th of April. If you are submitting for next year, really recommend engaging with our events, our newsletters, our mailings. If you have downloaded the MBA brochure online and you have ticked yes to receiving emails, you will receive all of the forthcoming program updates and mailings. If you haven't ticked that, then do go back and check it. We can't just automatically change your email preferences with data protection regulations here in the UK. So please do make sure that you are receiving all of the updates from us and checking in. With that, thank you very much, and thanks for tuning in.
And good luck. Goodbye.